Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
Foundations.
And you shall know that I am the Lord your God who brought you out from under the burden of the Egyptians. So there are these 4 I will statements. And these 4 I will statements are represented with 4 cups of wine during the Passover celebration.
Foundations. Understanding the Jewish foundations of our Christian faith. With Robbo Robinson and Mandy Warby.
On today's program, we are going to continue the theme of the Jewish Passover, understanding that it's a commemoration of God's deliverance and redemption of his people from slavery in Egypt. Now, in particular, we're going to look at how Passover is celebrated today and at the elements in the feast itself.
Each time we've started talking about Passover, we read from Leviticus 23, 4-5, where God said that these were appointed times of his, that they were holy, and that these were set times appointed to celebrate. And of course, the first one is on the 14th day of the month of Nisan at twilight. It's interesting why it was twilight, because if you go right back to the very beginning of Genesis when he said, and that was the evening and the morning, the first day, the Jewish day starts at sundown. So it's interesting that, again, at sundown on the 14th of Nisan, that's when the Passover would be started. And so we also learned a little bit about some church history, not so glowing, that wanted to sever any Jewish connection, which explains why most of the time the Jewish Passover, it never coincides with the dates of Easter within the Christian church.
Yep.
So, which is kind of sad, really.
It is very sad. But of course that was the edict from Nicaea, was that it would never coincide. That was their commitment, that it wouldn't happen.
Isn't that tragic?
Yeah, bizarre.
Because the creed, the Nicene Creed, when you read it, it's fantastic. It was just the extracurricular communications that came out of the council that were so anti-Semitic, and it's really, I think that the Christian church has been dealt a great disservice as a result. They've missed a lot of really important significance of these feasts. So anyway, we also, in a previous program, looked at the history with the story of the Jews in slavery in Egypt and how God commanded Moses to confront Pharaoh and demand that they be let go, and how Pharaoh would say yes and then he would say no, and that would result in a plague that would come upon them. 10 horrendous plagues that affected their water, their food, their buildings, their infrastructure, their health, their well-being, and even their very lives of the firstborn. And that was when God set this Passover feast, and won't go into all of what they did. It would just be worthwhile to go and listen to the other programs. But how do they actually celebrate this feast today? Because out of all the feasts, and there are 7 mandatory feasts, 3 of these feasts are required for the Jewish person to go to Jerusalem. And those 3 feasts are Passover, the Feast of Pentecost, and the Feast of Tabernacles. And they're called the pilgrimage feasts, where you would make pilgrimage to Jerusalem, to the temple. Well, there's no temple. So, and there's, half of the Jewish population now is living out still in the diaspora. So what do? Well, they've had to adapt everything. So we're going to start looking at what happens. Normally in a traditional Jewish home, there's about 15 steps. It takes all night, by the way, to do a Jewish Passover. It takes all night, and it's great fun. But for Messianic Jews, which is what we're going to look at, we're going to look at the elements and look at it from a Messianic point of view, a Christian point of view of how Jesus fulfills these. First of all, before the Passover actually starts, all Jewish families remove every trace of leaven, yeast, from their homes. And so in these preceding days, they clean out, they have a spring clean. All the leaven is removed, anything that's got yeast in it. But then what they do is they'll take a few little bits of bread and they'll hide them in an easy-to-find place. And the kids then play like this hide-and-seek game. They go and find this leaven and, yay, we got it. And then they'll go and get rid of it, and they've done their bit. It's a bit of a game. But why leaven? What's the big deal? Well, 1 Corinthians 5:6-7 says, clean out the old leaven so that you may be a new lump. Don't know if I like being called a lump.
Yeah, that's right. At least you're a new lump.
But I'm a new lump. Just as you are, in fact, unleavened. For Messiah, our Passover, also has been sacrificed. Therefore, let's celebrate the feast. It's talking about Passover, not with old leaven, nor with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. Leaven always talks about sin. This is talking about getting rid of sin. So the process of going through your house and getting rid of the leaven was like we are purging ourselves of sin. We are repenting. We want to be clean before God and not have this infection in us in any way, shape or form. Okay, and so in that passage, Paul was kind of explaining that leaven is this representation of sin and it needs to be purged out. And he is encouraging the believers in Corinth. And the interesting thing about the believers in Corinth, they were primarily Gentile believers.
Yeah.
So he was encouraging Gentile believers to celebrate Passover, and he was trying to explain the significance of it. So that's a good reason just there for Gentile believers, even if you don't want to, host a Passover meal, at least learn about it so you know why it's important, and that makes the Easter celebration that we have so much richer. Now, after they've had this purging the house of the leaven, on a Passover night, just before it starts, there is the lighting of the Passover candles. Now, this is typically done by the woman of the house, the wife and the mother of the family, just as she will always light the Sabbath candles every Friday evening. And the lighting of the candles during Passover is a really serious part of the celebration because it's the symbolism of God's presence. God is light. There's no darkness in him. So when they're lighting the candles, we're saying God's presence is here with us, among us. And that is very serious and it is very sacred when you realise you're in the presence of God. But as believers in Christ, we recognise he is the light of the world. And he came to bring light to those of us who were living in darkness. And John 8:12 and John 9:5. There's two parts to this, so we'll just read them together. Then Jesus again spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world, and he who follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. While I'm in the world, I am the light of the world. And of course, we know the presence of God. If the Spirit of Christ lives within us, we are also the lights of the world, which is what he said. And to the Jewish people, God said, you are a light to the nations. Yeah. A representation of him. So the lighting of the candles is very, very important. Then what happens is as you move on, there are 4 cups of wine during the Passover Seder. Again, Seder means meal. And they're all very incredibly significant. I'm just going to read the passage because we're going to sort of delve into these a little bit more in coming programs. But where these 4 cups come from, what the representation is. In Exodus 6, verses 6-7, it says, Say therefore to the sons of Israel, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burden of the Egyptians, and I will deliver you from their bondage. I will also redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgments, and I will take you for my people, and I will be your God. And you shall know that I am the Lord your God who brought you out from under the burden of the Egyptians. So there are these 4 I will statements, and these 4 I will statements are represented with 4 cups of wine during the Passover celebration. I will bring you out from under the burden of the Egyptians, and I will deliver you from bondage. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm, and I will take you for my people. And I know a lot of people have this funny thing about alcohol. So if you wanted to do a Passover, just do it with alcohol-free.
Yeah, grape juice.
Grape juice. The significance of these, and they all have a specific name, each of these cups. They all have a specific name, which actually match the statement that we just read, the 4 I wills from the passage in Exodus chapter 6 and verses 6-7. And we will have a look at that in the coming couple of programs, because all 4 cups of wine are not drunk consecutively, thank the Lord, but they're spread out a little bit throughout the meal, and they all have incredible significance. So we'll look at those in coming programs.
Well, I'm keen to find out also, and we might be able to explore this in the next couple of programs, where Jesus, in his Last Supper, he said, I will not drink of the cup again.
Exactly, we will touch on that.
I think it was the third glass. Yeah. So we'll find out more about the significance of Passover and how it relates to us as believers. On the next program, we're going to be looking at more of these elements of the Passover meal, including the 4 cups and the matzah bread.
This has been Foundations, a look at the Jewish foundations of our Christian faith. For study notes, resources and more, see vision.org.au/foundations.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.